Today's episode is going to be focused on the therapeutic process and specifically the therapist's role in that therapeutic relationship with individuals who are seeking out mental health treatment. So I'm going to be putting on my psychologist hat today and discussing some very specific roles or characteristics of a therapist with you guys. These are things that are considered to be qualities in a therapist, and I happen to see it a little bit differently. So I want to share that with you and explain my position. So the three characteristics of what is generally considered to be a good therapist that I'm going to discuss with you guys today are being objective, empathic, and validating.
I'm Dr. Williams, and this is my podcast. I have 2 graduate degrees in psychology, am a licensed mental health counselor, and an expert in the area of spirituality. I am devoted to living my best life and am sharing it with all of you. I'm bringing my expertise, education, and life experiences to you through this podcast. Everyone deserves to enjoy life, and that is what I'm here to talk about. Depression, anxiety, grief, you name it, we all go through it at one time or another. I believe there's a better way to come at these things than mainstream mental health care offers, and I'm here to offer you my perspective and dig into discovering how you can feel good no matter what life throws at you. It is my intention to contribute goodness to this world, and the content herein is how I do that. But one disclaimer before we dive in. Should you decide to apply the information offered here, be prepared for improvements in your life. You may even live happily ever after, and you'll only have yourself to thank. This is Feel Good Now, the Dr. Williams podcast.
Let's look at objectivity first. In a general sense, a therapist is expected to take an objective perspective with anyone who comes to them in a therapeutic relationship. The idea is that if the therapist is objective, then they are not imposing their own thoughts and feelings onto the individual who they are offering their counseling to. And at face value, that seems like a really good thing to do. But I want to look at it a little bit deeper and from a spiritual perspective based on the laws of attraction and the universal laws, which I understand to be true, and offer you some insight into why objectivity is not always the best thing. First of all, I looked up some definitions of objective, and there were 3 definitions, and the one that I want to focus on states, quote, uninfluenced by emotions or personal prejudices, unquote. So in other words, fair. Being objective means being fair. Well, just based on that definition, being objective requires you to check out of your emotions, which means that you're checking out of your guidance system. And I cannot imagine a single event or opportunity or situation where checking out of your emotional guidance system would be warranted, because ultimately, you really can't help anybody else if you have no guidance yourself. How can you sit there and offer guidance to somebody when you are checked out of your own guidance? When a therapist is sitting in a room with an individual and they are purposely being an objective person for them, they are purposely trying to keep their own thoughts and emotions out of it. And you may be familiar with the terms transference and countertransference. What that is when you impose your own thoughts or feelings onto the other person. So in transference, the patient, the individual receiving the therapy, is imposing their thoughts or feelings onto the therapist. And in countertransference, it is when the therapist is doing that back to the individual. And that is something that is attempted to be avoided at all cost in a therapeutic relationship. Because once you have your own emotions and thoughts involved in that relationship, it makes it very difficult to untie those ties and help the individual to look at their life in an objective way, meaning that the therapist is just offering their observations without their own personal opinions involved. So a lot of times what a therapist will do is offer something that's similar to a mirror. You learn about this in trainings as a therapist, that a lot of times therapists are considered a mirror to the individual who is sitting there and discussing their life. And the therapist just kind of reiterates what they're hearing to the individual, which allows the individual to feel validated and heard. There is actually an entire therapeutic modality that is based in mirroring for individuals in the therapeutic relationship. And Carl Rogers is the founding father of this modality. We call it Rogerian therapy. And what it entails is the individual comes in to see the therapist, and the therapist sits with the individual and basically just repeats everything that the individual says to them. So they do a kind of mirroring and reiterate what the individual is saying. And the idea is that the individual knows everything that they need, and the therapist is just this sounding board that bounces things back. And though I can appreciate the idea that every individual already knows what they need, I believe that 100%. I think that the thing that is lacking is helping them on how to retrieve that. But this mirroring that is done is really just a way of validating the individual's feelings and position and their situation. So let's talk about validation. I looked up the definition for that, and it is as states, quote, to establish the soundness, accuracy, or legitimacy of, unquote. So when you're validating somebody in a therapeutic relationship, you are basically helping them to feel justified in their feeling. So you kind of like display it back to them and say, yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. You feel this way because of this and this and this. And they're like, yes, finally, somebody who understands, somebody who gets where I'm coming from. At face value, that looks like a really good thing because the person is feeling better, right? They have somebody who gets where they're coming from, and that makes them feel a little bit better. But the question is validating therapeutic? Is it really helping the person improve things in their life? Well, I think the answer to that question is that it depends. It really depends on the content that the person is expressing. But if you're validating their negative emotions and justifying the way they feel, which is bad or angry or depressed or anxious, when you offer that validation to them as a therapist, that allows them to feel a little bit of relief from those negative emotions, because feeling validated is a step up from that negative emotion. But really, it's still miles away from helping them to feel good. And even though that validation feels like a bit of relief to them, and, offering people relief is a positive thing if they are in a really bad place. But here's the problem with it. By validating that negative emotion, you are anchoring them in it, because now they are even more invested in that feeling, because they feel, yes, I am justified in the way I feel. And my therapist is even telling me that, yeah, I should definitely feel that way. So can you see how that isn't really offering the best guidance? So the question comes, well, what would be better? What's better than validating? I believe what is better is coming at things from a spiritual perspective based on the laws of attraction, the way that I understand them. And as I was reading the book Ask and It Is Given by Jerry and Esther Hicks, the book offers 22 emotions on the emotional guidance scale. It also offers 22 exercises to help you move up the emotional guidance scale. If I were a therapist still, I would use this in my practice. This alone could help 100% of people because you are coming at things from the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is the way they feel. So let me give you an example. One of the exercises is choosing a thought that feels better. So let's say that somebody comes to you and you're a therapist and they have this problem and they are describing it to you. If that were me in the therapist role, I would allow a brief description, very brief, because we don't want to start gaining momentum on this negativity. They're here to feel better, right? And they want to improve their life. That is why they are here in your office seeking your help. 100% of people that come for mental health treatment are looking for improvement in one or more areas of their life. And the best way to do that is by helping them help themselves. So I would offer them a chance to give a brief description of the problem, keep it short, and then I would have them look at the emotional guidance scale and determine where they are currently on the scale. And that's looking at the 22 emotions that are on the scale. I have made up a chart that corresponds the emotion that a person is having at the time to the exercises that are in the book. So at that point, knowing where they are on the emotional guidance scale, I would then look to the appropriate exercises and do that right there in the therapy session, because this will help them not only to feel better right now, which is, of course, the most important thing there is to feel good now. That alone is going to help them improve their life. And if they can do that regularly, they will improve their life and be happy. But it also teaches them some of these things that they can be doing outside of the therapy sessions. That's really the goal, right? To empower the individual so that they can take control of their own emotions, be aware of them, and then guide them up the scale to a higher degree when they're feeling themselves being low. The exercises also help you to maintain good feelings. So if you're on that emotional guidance scale and you're high up in the happy and loving emotions and you want to maintain that, there's exercises in there for doing that. So this is not always about fixing a problem. This is always about feeling good now in every moment.
Real quick, before I get back to this topic, I want to know if you have a product or service that aligns with the content here on the Dr. Williams podcast. If so, this space could be your advertisement. Reach out to me by going to drwilliamspodcast.com. Okay, back to the episode.
One of the other examples is doing a virtual reality. And that is a brief exercise where an individual closes their eyes and they imagine a scenario with everything going perfectly. And they just sit and feel what that feels like in the moment when imagining that and visualizing it. And that alone will raise you up on the emotional guidance scale to start to feel better. It also offers you a place where you can go when you notice you're feeling low, and you can do this virtual reality and create this scenario in your mind so that you can start to feel a little bit better. These are just two examples of things that I think would be more therapeutic than validating or mirroring for an individual. In my opinion, validating is the opposite of empowering. So let's talk about empowering a little bit. What can a therapist do to empower the individual while in this therapeutic relationship? Well, first of all, you can't get better than modeling, because words don't teach, life experience teaches. So if you are an example to them of somebody who is in the receiving mode and feeling good now, they will feel that vibration just being in your presence. So your feelings and maintaining that good feeling for yourself, just as an individual who's living, is the most important thing. And then offering some education about the emotional guidance system and the exercises to help you to move up on the scale. Taking that role as a therapist would help so many people. And I know that that is what therapists want to do. Therapists go into this field because they want to help people. And the problem lies in that the education that these therapists are receiving is not coming at it from this standpoint. The laws of attraction do not have empirical data in the psychology field. So the modalities that are currently being used, though they are geared toward improving people's lives and helping to guide them into a better place, there is a better way, and this is it. This is the better way. I have a lot of therapist friends because I was in the field for several years, and I greatly appreciate these people. These are special people. These are people that are devoting their lives to helping other people. And that is coming from a place of love. So that is always the right move. And I am not trying to discourage the field of psychology or counseling or put down therapy in any way. This is good stuff, and this can really help a lot of people. But I think the modalities that are currently being used are just lacking, or maybe just even taking a slower path to guiding individuals in improving their lives. And I believe that this could be a way to really help a lot of people very quickly. And I know that that's what therapists want to do. The problem is that when you're in a field that is science-based, you have to follow the empirical data. And if you're not following the empirical data, then you're kind of looked down upon because science is proven. What I'm talking about here, the laws of attraction, is something that could definitely be proven should science focus on that. But as it is currently in our society, it is not something that is empirical. But that's the nice thing about having a practice, right? You get to choose how you help people. And I'm just saying, give this a try, because if it works, you're going to love it. And so are they. And everybody is going to be happier and better off because of it. But when we learn to be a therapist, when we are in school and we're learning about counseling modalities and therapist role, one of the most powerful suggestions is that a good therapist is an empathic therapist. And I think that is probably the most harmful role a therapist can take, is empathy. So let's talk about empathy. When I looked up the definition for empathy, there were two that I thought I would share with you. The first one is, quote, the intellectual identification of the thoughts, feelings, or state of another person, unquote. So that makes sense, right? So that really fits in with this therapist role, being the individual who hears the information and then reiterates it back to them how they heard it. So really, doesn't that sound a lot like validation and mirroring? You're just telling them, I see, this is the situation you're in, and this is why you feel the way you do. Well, we've already been over that. We've already been over how that's really the opposite of empowering. The second definition, quote, the ability to identify with or understand another's situation or feelings, unquote. Then the most important thing that I want to share with you about that definition was a synonym was also offered. And that synonym is pity. Pity. Think about that. Do you want somebody's pity? That's not usually something that you want. And the reason is because whenever we are using the word empathy, we're not talking about your ability to feel someone else's good feelings. We're talking about your ability to feel their negative feelings. So if you are sitting there in this role as a therapist and you are practicing empathy, what you're doing when this individual is describing all these negative emotions and you're being empathic, what you're doing is dropping yourself down on your own emotional guidance scale so that you can meet them where they are at their low point. And then that's when you do the validating and let them feel heard and justified in that feeling because you've put yourself there. You put yourself in this negative place and now you're feeling that negativity because empathy requires you to feel what the other person is feeling. Now, do you think that that is therapeutic? Is that really helping the person to get where they want to be? No. Not only are you not helping them, but now you've gone and dropped yourself down. So now you're not in a good place either. And you can't possibly model feeling good right now when you're down there where they are. If I were to be a therapist again, this is what I would do. The individual comes into my office and we review the emotional guidance scale, determine where they are, use an exercise to help lead them up the emotional guidance scale right there in the session, do some education about the laws of attraction and things that they could be doing which either maintain their good feeling or raise up their vibration outside of therapy, in life, in daily life, so that they can start changing their lifestyle to match up with feeling good now. When they do this, everything will fall into place. All you have to do is feel good right now, and all the good things come to you. So as a therapist, what does that look like for you? What do you want to be putting out for those that you're trying to help? You have to feel good now. There is a lot of discussion around therapist self-care because this work is usually negatively focused. Individuals who come into the therapeutic relationship come with an array of issues and problems. And the therapist ends up validating those things, which keeps them there for a long period of time. And that's why there is that stigma of mental health and the stereotype of it taking years and years and years for you to get through therapy. Because if you focus on the problem, you get more of the problem. You cannot solve a problem by focusing on the problem. You have to solve a problem by focusing on what's good. And really what's helpful is focusing on all the good things that have nothing to do with the problem. So you can't just think the opposite thought. If you have a problem and there's negativity associated with that, and even if you're really good at changing the way you think or verbalize into a positive attribute in discussing that situation, you're still focused on that problem. Does that make sense to you? You have to get off the topic. You have to get on to the other good things that are going on that have nothing to do with that situation, because then that will fall in line. Once you're focused on all these other things that are over here that don't have all the resistance and negativity attached to it, now you're going to start opening up that vibration, raising yourself up the emotional guidance scale, and you're going to start attracting more good things, including the one thing that you are focused on that you want to change. Stop focusing on it. That is probably the best advice I could give any therapist or any individual in a therapeutic relationship. Stop talking about the problem. You got to get off of it. On to something else. On to something that's good. Because when you pick up the stick of any topic, you pick up both ends. That which you want and the absence of that which you want. You cannot focus on one end and not have the other end there. But what are all these other things that are going on? When you were walking to your therapy session today, you found the most beautiful feather on the ground. and you heard somewhere that when you find a feather, it means there's an angel nearby, or whatever it means to you. But there's no resistance with that feather. It was just a nice thing that happened. Focus on that and the way it makes you feel. Talk about that with your therapist. You get what you focus on. So focus on the good stuff and feel good in the moment. Feel good right now.
That concludes this episode, but if you don't want to wait for the next episode to come out, I have more for you at drwilliamspodcast.com. You can learn more about me and my journey to podcasting, find all the ways to connect with me on social media, and there's a button to subscribe so you're the first to know what's new and upcoming. You also can shoot me an email at hello@drwilliamspodcast.com. You are so special to me, and your support does not go unnoticed. I want to support you too. This podcast is my outlet for growth because when you teach something, you hold yourself accountable and apply the information in life. But the inspiration for these episodes comes in a variety of ways, and one of those is through you. I want you to feel like this is your show too. So send me a message and let me know which episode is your favorite and why. And tell me if there's a topic you'd want to hear me talk about. Your feedback applies to so many people, and your suggestion could change someone's life for the better. The best way to do this is by subscribing to the show and leaving a review through your favorite podcast platform. I really listen to you guys, and this dialogue feeds my soul. You say that you're a fan of me, but truth be told, I am a fan of yours. Everything is working out for each of us, and we're all in this together.